There was a man who sold the Eiffel Tower to a scrap metal dealer for 70,000 francs. The buyer was so embarrassed when he realized he'd been scammed that he didn't call the police. And 6 months later, the same man came back to Paris and sold the Eiffel Tower again to a different buyer. This isn't fiction. This is the true story of Victor Lustig, the con artist so brilliant that even after his victims realized they'd been duped, they were too ashamed to admit it. Welcome to Finance Untold, where we expose the greatest scams in history. Today's scam, the man who proved that with enough confidence you can sell anything, even a national monument you don't own. Victor Lustig was born January 4, 1890 in Hosten, part of the Kingdom of Bohemia in Austria-Hungary. He grew up middle class. His father sold tobacco, nothing remarkable. But Victor was different. He spoke at least 5 languages fluently. He was exceptionally charming. And from a young age, he realized something powerful. People want to believe in magic. In his teens, he adopted aristocratic aliases with titles like Baron and Count. By 18, he was working the card tables in Vienna. One victim told True Detective Mysteries magazine he could make a deck of cards do anything but talk, but cards were small time. Victor had bigger ambitions. After World War I, his criminal career started with crossing the Atlantic on luxury liners. He dressed like a GQ model, displayed impeccable manners, and was smooth as silk. He would befriend wealthy passengers during the voyage, gain their trust, and then introduce them to his masterpiece, the money box. The Romanian box was a specially designed mahogany box, roughly the size of a steamer trunk. Victor would tell his marks in absolute secrecy that he had a machine that could duplicate any currency inserted into it. The only catch: it needed 6 hours to print a copy. These money makers would cost between $20,000 and $30,000. He would stock them with a few counterfeit $100 bills, which would then very slowly emerge from the box as if they were being printed. The victim would watch, mesmerized, as the first bill slowly emerged from the machine. 6 hours later, another one. They'd been conned, but they didn't know it yet. Since it took about 6 hours to print one bill, by the time the 2 or 3 bills in the box were finished printing, Victor was long gone. By the time they realized the machine was fake, Victor Lustig was already in another country, selling the same box to a new victim. But by 1925, Victor was bored. He needed a lot of money, because in 1919, Lustig married an innocent Kansas girl and started a family. He also began a long-term affair with a millionaire madame in New York named Billie Mae Sky Bell. He needed something bigger, something audacious, something that would cement his legacy as the greatest con artist who ever lived. And then, sitting in a Paris hotel room, he found it. It's May 1925. Victor Lustig was sitting in his Paris hotel room, reading a newspaper article about the Eiffel Tower. That gigantic structure had been built for the 1889 Paris World S Fair and was meant to be dismantled in 1909. By the time Lustig made it to Paris in 1925, the Eiffel Tower was 38 years old. Parisians hated it. Initially constructed for the World Fair, principal engineer Gustave Eiffel had to put up most of the 7.8 million gold francs himself to build it. A petition sent to the government after it went up called it a barbaric bulk and a ghastly dream. Writer Guy de Maupassant called it a lanky pyramid that should be smashed. The article Victor was reading discussed the problems with maintaining the tower. It had declined in financial viability due to expensive maintenance and declining attendance. The journalist speculated, might it be better to just sell it for scrap? Victor's eyes lit up. That was it. He would sell the Eiffel Tower. Never mind that it didn't belong to him. That was just a minor detail. Victor went to work immediately. First, he hired a forger to produce fake government stationery identifying himself as Deputy Director General of the Minister de Postes at Telegraphes. Then he made a list of the top scrap metal dealers in Paris. He sent each of them an official-looking letter inviting them to a confidential meeting at the Hôtel de Crillon, one of Paris's most luxurious hotels on the Place de la Concorde. The letter explained that this was a matter of national importance. Absolute secrecy was required to avoid public outcry. 5 dealers showed up. They were ushered into a private hotel room where Deputy Director Lustig waited. Because of engineering faults, costly repairs, and political problems I cannot discuss, the tearing down of the Eiffel Tower has become mandatory, he reportedly told them in a quiet hotel room. The tower would be sold to the highest bidder, he announced. The dealers were captivated. This was the deal of a lifetime. To sell the illusion further, Victor arranged for the dealers to tour the Eiffel Tower itself. He gave them a private inspection, pointed out structural problems, discussed the logistics of dismantling 7,300 tons of iron. The dealers left the meeting convinced. They submitted their bids. But Victor had already chosen his mark. During his time with the dealers, Lustig kept watch on who would be the most likely to fall for his scam and found his mark in André Poissonin, an insecure man who wished to rise up amongst the inner circles of the Parisian business community. Poisson was perfect. He was ambitious, hungry to prove himself. And most importantly, he was an outsider trying to break into Paris's elite business world. Victor invited Poisson to a second private meeting. And then he played his masterstroke. Lustig convinced him that he was a corrupt official, claiming that his government position did not give him a generous salary for the lifestyle he wished to enjoy. Think about the psychology here. Victor admitted he was corrupt. He asked for a bribe. Since Mr. Poisson knew that government officials were corrupt and that a con man would never ask for a bribe, he was convinced that all was legit. A con man wouldn't ask for a bribe. Okay, only a real government official would. The bribe became proof of authenticity, believing that securing the sale of the Eiffel Tower would elevate his standing. Poisson agreed to pay a large bribe to secure ownership of the Eiffel Tower. Convinced that he was making a smart investment, Poisson handed over 70,000 francs to Lustig ostensibly for both the bribe and the sale. Victor took the money and immediately left for Vienna. Victor watched the newspapers every day, expecting to see his name and his masterful scam on the front page. He waited and waited, but there was nothing. When poor Mr. Poisson had gone to the post, telegraph and telephone headquarters with his bill of sale to ask when the tower would be dismantled, they laughed him out of the office. He was so embarrassed about being duped and so afraid of ruining his reputation in the city that he didn't mention it to anyone else, not even the police. Lustig suspected that when Poisson found out he had been conned, he would be too ashamed and embarrassed to inform the French police. And he was right. The shame of admitting he'd been scammed was worse than losing 70,000 francs. Poisson stayed silent. Victor Lustig had just pulled off the perfect crime. Sold a national monument he didn't own to a businessman who paid him cash, and the victim was too embarrassed to report it. Most criminals would take the money and disappear forever. But Victor Lustig was not most criminals. When Victor realized what had happened, he headed back to Paris to resell that tower. His accomplices thought he was insane. When Lustig suggested selling the tower again to his accomplices the following month, they thought he was crazy. But Victor was confident. He had gotten away with it once. Why not twice? He sent out 5 more letters to different salvage companies and repeated the entire process. Same hotel, same pitch, same private tours of the Eiffel Tower, and it worked. Another dealer submitted a bid, but this time something went wrong. After his second mark suspected he'd been scammed, he called the police. This time, news of the scam hit the papers. Lustig fled to the US to evade arrest, but he had done it. He had sold the Eiffel Tower twice. Victor Lustig moved to the United States and continued his criminal career. He moved his wife and daughter to the Chicago suburbs. But he wasn't settling down. He resumed selling his money boxes. He ran poker scams. He counterfeited currency. And then he made a mistake that would define the rest of his life. He conned Al Capone. Yes, that Al Capone, the most dangerous gangster in America. Victor borrowed $5,000 from Capone, promising to double it through a stock scheme. He kept the money for 2 months, then returned it untouched, claiming the deal fell through. Capone was impressed by Lustig's honesty and gave him $1,000 as a reward. Victor had just conned the mob. On December 11, 1928, businessman Thomas Kearns invited Lustig to his Massachusetts home to discuss an investment. Lustig crept upstairs and stole $16,000 from a drawer. Such a barefaced theft was out of character for the con man, and Kearns screamed to the police. Then Victor made an even bigger mistake. Next, Lustig had the audacity to trick a Texas sheriff with his money box, and later gave him counterfeit cash, which attracted the attention of the Secret Service. The law was closing in. Secret Service agent Peter Rubino vowed to put Lustig behind bars. Rubino was a heavy-set Italian-American with a double chin, sad eyes, and endless ambition. Born and raised in the Bronx, Rubino had made his name by trapping the notorious gangster Ignazio the Wolf Lupo. For years, Rubano hunted Victor Lustig. But Victor was always one step ahead, till May 10, 1935. Lustig finally felt a tug on the velvet collar of his Chesterfield coat on a New York street corner. A voice ordered, "Hands in the air." Lustig studied the circle of men surrounding him and noticed Agent Rubano, who led him away in handcuffs. In 1935, Lustig was captured after masterminding a counterfeit banknote operation so vast that it threatened to shake confidence in the American economy. He was sentenced to 20 years at Alcatraz, the most secure prison in America. But Victor Lustig wasn't done yet. On the Sunday before Labor Day, September 1st, 1935, Lustig escaped from the inescapable Federal Detention Center in Manhattan. He fashioned a rope from bed sheets, cut through his bars, and swung from the window like an urban Tarzan. When a group of onlookers stopped and pointed, the prisoner took a rag from his pocket and pretended to be a window cleaner. Landing on his feet, Lustig gave his audience a polite bow and then sprinted away like a deer. Police dashed to his cell. They discovered a handwritten note on his pillow, an extract from Victor Hugo's Les Miserables. He allowed himself to be led in a promise. Jean Valjean had his promise. Even in escape, Victor Lustig had style. But freedom didn't last long. He was recaptured 27 days later and sent to Alcatraz. It's said he had a postcard of the Eiffel Tower taped on his cell wall with the words, "Sold for 100,000 francs" written across it. Victor Lustig died March 11, 1947. When Victor died of pneumonia in 1947, his death certificate listed his occupation as salesman in tribute to his greatest scam. In a final irony, Lustig's death certificate listed his occupation as apprentice salesman. Some apprentice. Victor Lustig knew more ways to get people to part with their money than any legitimate salesman ever learned. So what can we learn from Victor Lustig? Because this isn't just a story about a con artist. It's a story about human psychology. Confidence beats competence. Poisson didn't verify Lustig's credentials. He didn't call the ministry. He didn't check if the Eiffel Tower was actually for sale. Why? Because Lustig acted like he belonged. Lustig had 10 commandments for con men. They included, be a patient listener. It is this, not fast talking, that gets a con man his coups. Never look bored. Wait for the other person to reveal any political opinions, then agree with them. Let the other person reveal religious views, then have the same ones. He didn't sell the Eiffel Tower through fast talking. He sold it by listening, by making his victim feel important, by reflecting back what they wanted to hear. Shame is a powerful silencer. Poisson lost 70,000 francs, a fortune. But admitting he'd been scammed would cost him something more valuable, his reputation. So he stayed silent. That silence allowed Victor to strike again. This is why scams work. Victims don't report them, because the embarrassment is worse than the financial loss. The bribe proved authenticity. By admitting he was corrupt, Victor made Poisson trust him, because a con man wouldn't admit corruption only, a real official would. It's reverse psychology at its finest. The thing that should have been a red flag became proof of legitimacy. Exclusivity creates urgency. Victor told the dealers this was confidential, that secrecy was essential. A public outcry had to be avoided. By making the deal exclusive, he made them feel special. And by demanding secrecy, he prevented them from talking to each other or verifying the story. Modern scams use the exact same tactics. Cryptocurrency, pump and dumps, NFT drops, exclusive investment opportunities. The language changes. The psychology doesn't. Victor Lustig died in 1947, but his playbook is alive and well. Every phishing email that claims to be from your bank, every investment opportunity that demands secrecy, every exclusive deal with a time limit, every scammer who asks for a deposit to prove you're serious, they're all using Victor Lustig's techniques. The Eiffel Tower scam works because it exploits three things: authority, government official, scarcity, exclusive opportunity, and shame, victim won't report. Those three elements drive every successful scam in history, and they're still working today. Because human psychology hasn't changed. We still want to believe in shortcuts. We still trust authority. We still fear embarrassment. And as long as those three things are true, there will always be another Victor Lustig. Hit like if this story blew your mind. Subscribe to Finance Untold. We expose the greatest scams, frauds, and cons in history. Turn on notifications because every financial fraud has a lesson worth learning. Drop a comment. What's the most audacious scam you've ever heard of? Could this happen today? Victor Lustig sold the Eiffel Tower twice, and the victims were too ashamed to call the police. That's not just a scam, it's genius. Thanks for watching. Stay financially untold.